Good morning. Welcome to Community Voice. I'm your host, Keith Parris. I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. A little low, man. I can't do this other chair. Good morning, Clark Kent.
Who you with?
I'm with you, bro. What's happening, Apostle?
Nah, I try no horns today, man.
Hey, man.
Just keyboard and drums.
I heard, bits and pieces of the program with Angela Harris. Good job. I told her off air, don't ever run for political office, and because I think she's an uncompromising voice. And the one thing about politics is it begins to compromise your voice. I don't care who you are. Yeah. You got to moderate in order to get elected. And so sometimes you just need that voice crying out in the wilderness, for justice, and certainly justice in the area. And a lot of people don't see education as a justice issue, but it really is.
Yeah.
So appreciate that and the work she does. And I'm a hater. When I first saw her, I used to be like, why don't you go sit down?
Sit down somewhere.
Yeah, that's how I hate. But over the years, I can see, what she was about. And so let me do this. Was it Tyrone W. was talking about study hall?
Yeah.
My experience when I was at Parkman, study hall was used for punishment. I know that other people, study hall, you'd have a schedule, in your schedule, you'd have study hall. Dominican was different. Dominican, we were on a modular system, and that modular system meant that the day was broken into 20-minute segments. Depending on the class you took would be the combination of the segments. Bells rang every 20 minutes. When I first got there, that was tripping me out. All you heard was bells every 20 minutes. You hear the bells. That's why my junior year, the senior class prank was to steal the bells. One of the greatest senior pranks of all time. So now we don't have those bells, right? But, and I don't know if y'all have ever heard of Pablo, where with the dog and the stimulus with the dog, stimulus response. So we just knew, you look at the clock, and you knew that if you had a lab, that's 60 minutes. Gym was 60 minutes. Other classes were 40 minutes. So you just knew how to move. Because I'm telling you, when I first got there and all I heard were those bells, it's like, oh, man. So, but we didn't have study hall. We didn't have assigned study hall. We had resource centers. So there was a math resource center, social studies resource center, English resource center, science resource center. Did I say social studies? And so that's where you would go. And then a lot of the learning material would be in those different resource centers, right? And you weren't assigned. It was up to you. Because what Dominican was preparing students for when you got to college and how you kind of move. And then we were able to, it could have come along my junior year, senior year, we were able to do certain electives like you get in college. And what was the other thing we had? Oh, religion went from, it became mandatory, was accredited class. Now, because I was Protestant and many of the black students out there were Protestant, we could opt out of religion prior to either my junior year or senior year. Once it became a credit, you had to take religion. So so we're hearing that conversation, very different piece about study hall. I know maybe once or twice in the 3 years I was at Parkman, I got sent to study hall. But our resource centers was there. You go in and you do your work. And so a lot of times you could do a lot of your homework in school. And then there's a question about homework and whether or not homework is even beneficial. Homework is beneficial if I have to go home and do reading for a class. Then I think, but just to go home and do busy stuff. Now for young kids, it's also because, kids are learning by rote repetition. So, you might go home and you work on certain things to kind of enhance. But, there's been a debate about, there's a lot of schools that don't even give homework, right? And for whatever reasons. But when I heard that whole discussion about study halls, I just remember my experience at Dominican. And I had already, I was a user of libraries. I mean, that started for me when I was like 6 years old. So I had no problems going to the library, sit there, read, study. As a matter of fact, Clark, you remember the movie Cornbread Earl and Me?
Yeah.
Jamal Wilkes and a young Lawrence Fishburne III.
Yeah.
Well, it was one of the few black books in the library at Dominican was a book called The Hog Butcher. And The Hog Butcher is by a guy named Ron Fair. And they used that book to do Cornbread Earl and Me. I read the book before they did the movie. I was like, oh. So you hate when people say, I read the book, it's better than the movie. Yeah, I read the book. It was better than the movie. So yeah, that was when I heard that whole conversation about education.
Let me ask you, how come when I hear this a lot, the book is better than the movie? Why they don't never make the movie like the book then? If it's always
well, I think because a lot of times, there's this creative licensing that people do. Like you making up dialogue because depending on the book and what's inclusive in the book. So I think that's it, because reading it is very different than how do you make it live action. So I think a lot of times it's just so you keep the attention of the audience. Books can they can kind of go on. I mean, like War and Peace, I don't know, close to 1,000 pages, I think, in terms of reading that book. And I don't know how many people read it in Russian. So anyway, here's the other thing. When I got off the program yesterday, as I do normally, I check in with my wife, and she said boy, it's amazing how your program can dissolve into nonsense. But I had a response. I said, no, that was probably one of those great philosophical conversations that people have. And so I did mention a guy named Hume, and boy, the stuff I remember, let me pull it up. I remember from my philosophy class. I love philosophy, man. I mean, it was like one of the best classes I took in college after movies. Because movies was great, man. All you have to do is just go and watch movies. That was a great class. But remember I said, I don't know if you guys remember. Here's the word. So here's Wednesday's word. Wednesday's word. Skepticism. Skepticism. That's Wednesday's word. It started even before we got on the air when we were talking about who killed Michael Jackson. There were some skeptics, and skeptics then come up with conspiracy theories, right? Isn't that how it works? We doubt what we see or hear, and so then we go into conjecture and we do conspiracy theories. And I said, oh yeah, that's like Hume's. Well, Hume, it is a guy named David Hume. He's one of the most famous thinkers in history, and a perfect hit. Let's talk about the question I asked. Hume took the idea of Locke and Berkeley, and he took it into this thing called radical skepticism. So here's what Hume's view on reality behind the door. Remember I said, does it exist beyond the door? The problem of habit. Hume argued that you cannot prove anything exists outside of your immediate senses. If you look at the door, you know it's there. If you turn your back, you assume that it's still there. And then he has this illusion of constancy. Hume said your mind fills in the blanks based on habit and memory. You have no logical, rational proof that the door or the world outside it continues to exist when you aren't looking at it. You just have a strong animal belief because it's always been there before. And then self-illusion. Hume even argues that if you look inside your own mind, you don't find a permanent soul or self. You only find a bundle of constantly changing perceptions. In short, Hume argued that human reason cannot prove the existence of an external world. You have to rely on blind faith and custom to get through the day. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, and it really is. And so when you hear this whole idea of skepticism, Rhonda and I were talking this morning, and I was saying the Sunday school lesson was on Thomas, and Thomas doubting the resurrection of Jesus. Thomas was a lot of people, because if we don't see it, it don't exist, right? It's in our immediate world. When we were having a conversation back in 20 about COVID, and people would talk about, well, I didn't see it in my neighborhood. So in their minds, it didn't exist. Even though there was a different reality out there, that even though you didn't see it in your neighborhood, it was happening all around us. So there's always a certain, and I think the skepticism is healthy. I think that you should be able to question those things that you think or believe. It's kind of hard, though, when, to disprove a belief, right? I mean, people feel very strongly about those things that they believe in, which gets us to Stevie Wonder when he wrote the song Superstition. I think the line, and then those things that we don't understand is superstition, right? So even one of the benefits of Be Healthy, Be You is that you have practitioners of medicine coming on and explaining how things work in a way that people can understand it. Because the overwhelming majority of us didn't go to medical school. We didn't go to nursing school. We didn't go to dental school, right? So, all we can do is rely on what people tell us, right? Or what did you say, Ortesises? That's right, Ortesises.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Oh man.
We're Robitussin. We do Road Association here sound like. So anyway, I just thought that, man, so it didn't have to be a cleanup. I was on point. I had, and I did cite the right person, people like Locke and Berkeley. But again, I don't know why I took to philosophy. Maybe because it was abstract thinking. And I could always get with abstract concepts, except algebra. Algebra was the only abstract that I struggled with algebra, man. Dude, it made no sense to me at all, man. Now, I have a better understanding of geometry now, because of angles, right? If you're doing sports, let's say we were talking, I don't know who I was talking to yesterday. We were talking about DBs.
That's so funny because my son, he was good at geometry, but he was bad in algebra.
Yeah.
He was bad in algebra.
Yeah, because algebra is formulatic. It is unknown. I mean, it is, but you know what? Most of our scientific development is based on algebra. Yeah. People putting together formulas. And I did. Now, another course I really, really enjoyed the second time in college was logic. How do we think? Logical thinking. And this whole thing, I'm preparing a message right now on the importance of reason and right reasoning. How important that is, where we can reason, right, as opposed to being emotional about a situation. That there's okay, let's see. Zebra said, because why are you hiding it, man?
I put it on the screen.
Oh, okay. Oh, because you weren't raised with an abacus? No, but I had a vivid imagination. Like I said, when I got to philosophy, where a lot of students struggled, I didn't. It was just like, oh, yeah. It made sense to me in terms of that. And even theology and being attracted to theology, the study of God. Theo means divine, right? Theo, the Greek. The study, those things were fascinating to me. Good morning, Barbara Smith. They were fascinating to me, and maybe not that anyone cares. My view of religion is, what is the purpose of religion? What is the purpose of religion? And then once we get into defining what is the purpose of religion, and then particularly your religion. I was speaking yesterday to a Palestinian brother. He was the garage guy that came out, and we ended up talking for a whole hour. And I don't know if he was just buttering me up to sell me a new garage door. But, you know, we talked about Gaza. We talked about the West Bank. His folks are from the West Bank and how they got to America. Right now, you know, he just said he just went in for his green card interview. He thinks that America is the greatest country on the face of the earth, which I kind of looked at him going like, some days, and then other days it's like, But yeah, I mean, even when we get into, you know, the purpose of religion, and I'm not going to be specific, but if I ask you, brothers, what do you think the purpose of religion is? Okay, thank you for that. 414-444. Man, I appreciate your answers. 414-444-5250. That was so deep there. Y'all was like
contemplating.
No, I mean, just when you think about religion, what do you think the purpose is?
I never thought about it like that.
The purpose.
Well, but you're a practitioner of religion, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I never thought about it like
Never thought about it. Just showed up for it.
that.
So you ask, what is the purpose of religion?
Yeah, for you, what do you think the purpose is? All right, let me get the caller.
Maybe they might know. Boy.
That boy deep.
Yeah, that boy got me this morning.
Well, you could do your question.
You sure got yours in, Jack.
Caller, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Keith. It's Johnny.
Hey, John, you got 2 minutes. What's the purpose of religion?
Wasn't my original thing, but you got me on that one. I think it technically linguistically means relinking, kind of something like that. Like
No, what is religion? What does it mean to you?
I kind of like what I just said, but I think it means you're trying to connect with that inner invisible thing, like behind the chair you were talking, behind the door.
Mhm.
Trying to figure out how can we know. And that was for my first question: is how do you know when to draw the line with that nurse? Very concrete versus David Hume behind the door. It's kind of like that invisible something beyond time and space
Mhm.
that a physicist would be talking about normally, but we can't at our level. Like you and me with algebra are horrible, from the way you describe it. I'm just like you. So how would we know from your nurse that you talk about, very concrete, versus David Hume's, which you talked earlier, which is, I think, the religious part. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think that, the abstraction and our sense of, someone said yesterday, does our consciousness create our reality? All right, appreciate you. Let me get this other caller because I guess 9:30. Caller, welcome to the program.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
I believe the purpose of religion is to prepare you for heaven, hell, or to live forever on earth. I'm going to hang up and I can't wait to hear your responses. Love you all. Bye-bye.
All right.
Oh,
Got me.
wow.
Zebra says that religion, I believe, gives shared community purpose of life and rules for good behavior. So he's saying that there is the mores that religion promotes. Again, she mentioned afterlife, where what happens to us once we're dead. Judaism says that either you're resurrected or you're dead. Christianity becomes a little problematic because Christianity really introduced our perception of heaven and hell, right? That it was but in Judaism, it was life or death. Heaven or hell is reward or punishment, right? So it depends on how you look at that. People, yesterday I was listening to Senator Moreno dealing with his ex son-in-law who's been accused of abuse there in Ohio. and they're trying to get him to step away as a congressman. And one of the things he said that was the 7th level of hell. Well, if anybody reads Dante, they know that Dante had all these levels of hell, right? And he was saying that was the highest level of hell in terms of his ex-son-in-law's behavior. So the idea of religion, I think religion is the shared thing. Now, I heard someone say this many years ago, that human beings have a worship gene, right? That they have this gene that says that we need to worship something greater than ourselves. And that gets into this word metaphysics, right? Metaphysics, the word meta means to go beyond. And so to even go beyond that. And so then it gives people, again, it's the mores. I mean, if you looked at your religious experience, they talked a whole lot about moral behavior, right? You shouldn't sin, and make sure you don't sin. And we weren't always clear on what sin was. In my mind, sin was what I wouldn't do. Sin is what Rideout does.
Almost every day.
Almost every day, right? So, but understanding that, and again, that's the thing where even in our religious experiences, it goes on the exposure of the person who's teaching on religion, right? So if you're only exposed to certain things, then it gets back to our original thought about Hume. Does it exist over and beyond my understanding? Now, I believe that just because I don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because it really does. Like, I don't see New York City right now, but New York City exists.
Well, you don't see oxygen, but oxygen exists.
Oxygen exists. Boy,
come on, man. That boy, it's Oxford time, boy. That boy deep.
Oh, Sookie now. Oh, man, help us.
As the old mother you sit on the front row. Oh,
my. Good googly goo. Oh, man.
Good googly goo.
He could breathe now. He couldn't breathe earlier.
Right. I was blind, but now I can see.
I was today years old when I found out.
Clark had back me up like,
boy, you know what? That boy been on the road.
but didn't Jesus say that even though we don't see the wind,
Yeah,
that doesn't mean it don't exist.
that part. And speaking of Jesus, we need to be more like him.
Ooh.
So like even if you in traffic and somebody flip you off, you should be more like Jesus. Like, follow them home and flip their tables over. Be more like Christ. Flip their tables over and take credit.
It's what Jesus did.
It's what Jesus did.
Rhonda's right. See how quickly it dissolved into nonsense. All right, y'all. Hey, you're listening to Community Voice. Wednesday's word is skepticism. But boy, we'll get so deep, man. I thought I got them. They got me. Yeah, but what about this? You go,
Sometimes
it makes you go, again. All right. Hey, y'all, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Saeed is the winner.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Donovan McKinney, a new member of the Congressional Black Caucus, won once those Detroit votes came in. And he was a DSA candidate too, but I think that his election was more really returning the seat that was formerly represented by John Conyers Jr.
Okay.
It was more, returning that seat, into the black representation.
So let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Democratic socialism. Now I can get in. I did a whole political thing on what is socialism. That whole piece. right now, and this kind of brings us back to where we are here, even in the state of Wisconsin. You have endorsed County Executive David Crowley, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Do you think that, one, there is this schism in the Democratic Party where the so-called establishment, mainstream Democrats, moderate Democrats against progressive Democratic socialists? Is there a schism currently in the party?
No, hopefully I'm not seeing it as a schism. I'm not afraid of the word democratic socialism, as a matter of fact. I mean, when Darren Madison ran against a regular Democrat, some really, a mayor of a small city here in Wisconsin and so on, ran to be my state representative, I endorsed him because I understood what democratic socialism is as opposed to socialism. I mean, a democratic socialism is still a market system of government, but with strong social programs and regulations. So yeah, if anybody's going to be called a socialist if they believe in Social Security, if they believe in the Social Security block grant fund so that old people can get Meals on Wheels, if they believe in Medicaid, that automatically makes you a socialist. If you want to regulate markets, if you want people's investments to be monitored by the Security Exchange Commission, that makes you a socialist. So I think that, we're at a period in the country, if not the state, where we have to really educate people. Because when people vote for, I think, democratic socialists, they're basically responding to their needs for affordability, for their needs to, their sense that maybe here's a candidate that will meet my social needs. And so I think that we got to stop being scared of the word.
Do you
That being said, go on.
So do you, usually when you get a rise of populism, and I think that you can look at that from the perspective of right now, the Democratic Party, I think you also got that Trump ran on a certain level of populism.
Right.
Let me just kind of throw this in, this kind of being parenthetical. So when we were on the brink during COVID and the government pumped all this money into the economy, wasn't that a level of socialism?
If you'd like to call it that, yeah.
Well, the point I'm getting to is, but Republicans, I don't know any Republican state that sent back stimulus money. I don't know any business that was eligible for the different stimulus monies out there who didn't take advantage of it. So my question is, why then isn't that socialism? And the fact that the things that you just outlined, that someone would have access to adequate health care, is socialism, and socialism in that pejorative sense.
Well, yeah, you make a great example. But the problem with that example is that, Republicans, after taking the money, they criticized that. They blamed inflation, following inflation, on the fact that we had pumped so much money into the economy. They were not happy about the stimulus. And of course, a lot of people out there gave Donald Trump credit for the stimulus because he signed it with his big, ugly marker. And people thought he gave them the money when Democrats fought him and made him sign some of those bills, that bill. And so, socialism is part of our democracy. It's a mixture of a market economy with strong regulations and with social programs. And of course, the Trump administration is trying to dismantle all of our social programs, trying to destroy Medicaid, Medicare, public education, good tip, all of our democratic institutions that could be perceived as socialism. So, so I say all that to say this. If people shouldn't fall for the okie doke, and say, oh, I hate the establishment because the establishment is free speech. The establishment are having libraries. The establishment is getting your Social Security check every month. The establishment is having Medicaid where your baby can go to the hospital. The establishment is Medicaid so that your grandmother can go to the nursing home where you can no longer care for her at home. Or you can get Medicaid to keep her at home. So the establishment, the so-called reviled establishment, right now, the establishment is fighting to preserve all of these institutions for people.
So how do you, to me, it's, Jermaine was just commenting on some of the commercials that's being run against Francesca Hahn here in the state. How important is it for the Democratic label to be able to define itself and not be defined by Republicans?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that Republicans are running those negative ads against Francesca Hahn. And they're running against it because name recognition is name recognition is name recognition. They are literally deliberately trying to drive the vote towards Francesca Hahn because they perceive that she's the easiest one to beat because of that moniker that she's adopted of being a democratic socialist. Although it's very likely that she believes the same thing that other Democrats believe. To a large degree, wanting public education to be good, wanting health care to be good. But they perceive, and perhaps they're right, that, polls demonstrated that she was a little bit weaker than the other candidates who were on the ballot with regard to winning the general election. Now, we're not at that point yet because we have David Crowley there, and people should not besmirch him as some sort of establishment candidate. He's somebody that was born in 53206, grew up in Milwaukee Public Schools, early career, was part of the underground. What was the organization called?
Urban Underground.
Urban Underground, really saving youth, before they got in trouble, and really ministering to other young people who could get caught up in the system and drop out of school. He was a community organizer, and then he went to the state. He's one of us. We've raised him. We know him. And so people should not be concerned that this so-called establishment, a candidate endorsed by the governor, somehow won't look out for us needing public education, needing health care.
I had the opportunity to interview 4 of the Democratic candidates for the nomination on the Democratic side. And the question I asked them was, what should happen on August 12th, regardless of who wins the race? So I asked you that question. What should happen on August 12th?
Well, we have a very short runway toward the general election because our elections are held so late. A lot of primaries were done in March, in May. And so, our nominee needs to get to be known statewide, to the wider electorate. And so we'll have any choice but to try to get together and endorse whoever the winner is, and work, not just endorse them, but work, because we need this trifecta. We need to win all 3 houses in this state in order to level set where we are at in the state. We got some, the legislature has some serious decisions to make after we're in the middle of the Trump era. $1.2 trillion of Medicaid has been cut, and the impact that that's going to have on Badger Care. I mean, there's going to be a lot of hard decisions that have to be made, no matter who our nominee is. If we win the governor's race, all of those distinctions about Democrat, socialist, Democrat, this or that will disappear, because governing will be the main thing. And, the concern about who wins the primary is this. Will you help or hurt down ballot in the state? Will our nominee drag down other people or build up other people in the state so that we can win the Senate, so that we can win the Assembly here in the state, so that we can, one of the biggest complaints that I heard was that Tony was there by himself. Tony was there with both houses being Republicans. And so he was, he had his hands tied a lot in terms of the only people he could negotiate with were Republicans. People got mad. Oh, he negotiated with the Republicans. Well, they were in the majority. And so in order to level set things, we definitely need our nominee to bring along people in other districts. We need to win more seats in the Assembly and in the Senate.
Do you think that through Tom Tiffany, because prior to all of and you can't describe it any other way, but the chaos that happened on the Democratic side, Trump, though he might not be on the ballot, Trump is still, what would I say? He could be a driving force in terms of turnout, because I just think that this is a turnout election. If Michigan is any example, just what we saw in the primary, where they saw it was a strong turnout, that, the bottom line for people who might tend to support Democrats is that we need to go after anything and anybody that's aligned with Trump.
Oh, and let me just tell you, Tom Tiffany is a MAGA Trump. He's a member of the so-called Freedom Caucus. These are the most right-wing. If people want to talk about how far left our caucus is, think about how far right. These are the people that deny women reproductive freedom. These are people that don't want Black people to vote. These are people, and Tom Tiffany belongs to the Freedom Caucus. Lil could tell you what a whole lot means. I heard somebody say, boy, if we elect Tom Tiffany, most of us gonna be begging for Scott Walker to come back. That's how bad he is.
So don't you think that then should be the focus, not necessarily who heads the the Democratic ticket, as much as making sure that Tom Tiffany does not become governor?
Exactly. That's the conversation that has to occur on August 12th, to use your date. All hands on deck for defeating Tom Tiffany. That is much more important than who wins the primary, quite frankly. We have got to have a Democratic governor. And that's what focus ought to be. And not just, with lip service, but actual work that needs to be put in for our nominee.
A few minutes left. I just see, do you think that the SAVE Act has any chance of passing before you all go on your break?
Well, I hope not. I hope that Republicans will hold in the House and the Senate. We have very few days that we're in session before the election. We go back August 31st. And then that's the end of the session where we need to get a budget done for the rest of this year. So hopefully the clock will run out and they won't be able to do that. There's a lot of resistance to it. And plus, like they have demanded, for example, that our state turn over our voter rolls to the federal government. And Tony Evers has refused to do that. And several states have refused to do that. So,
there's even been some red states, though. There have been red states who have refused to give over.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there has been, and maybe fear precedent that, if Republicans do it, maybe Democrats can do it. But I was surprised that there were a couple of red states that said, no, we're not turning over our voter information. And I think that there's fear out there that well, let me ask you this question. Do you think that there will be election interference in the midterm in November?
Well, we're already seeing that they're sort of setting the stage for it. I saw last night on TV in Michigan that the Justice Department, if someone had sent monitors to monitor, the Wayne County election collection center, place where 25% of the votes are, and of course where Black people live in Wayne County, and they sent people just to stand around. Now they didn't interfere, but they standing there. So what I'm concerned about is whether they have ICE, bring in ICE, and ICE actively interferes with people coming in to polls or wearing ICE uniforms or being mad, standing out of polling places. This is what I'm concerned about. So even if you're not, an immigrant, even if you're not an undocumented person, if you're brown, you might just decide not to go in to a polling place. If you're a light-skinned Black person, you might decide, I ain't doing this.
Oh, snap.
If you look Somali, so it was designed to frustrate turnout, and that's indeed what it will do. You said you were going to go, but I want to, Keith, before you kick me off, I want to tell people to go to my website, gwenmore.house.gov, to look out the summer feeding programs where kids can get free meals this summer. That's very, very important, I think, as we got 1 in 4 kids in Milwaukee going hungry. And I want to make sure I get that out, that word out.
All right, Congress. I'm glad I voted early.
Oh, did you have a 12 ballot?
No.
Okay,
No, you were saying if you were light skinned. So I'm glad if I showed up at the polling place.
Well, I'm just telling you, I'd be worried if I was light skinned.
DJ really in trouble.
I'd be worried about, well, you know what? If you dark skinned, you look African.
Right.
I mean, whatever. It's designed to intimidate you. Well, Keith, I know you personally, so you probably would make it.
I don't know. I'm so glad we voted early. Lord, I'm so glad. Like, I go to vote. I don't come home right to see what happened to Keith. ICE. ICE. Yeah, no, you good, man.
So that's what I'm saying is that thousands of Wisconsinites have lost food aid in the largest cut of SNAP. So 24,000 fewer Wisconsinites federal food aid.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I want to make sure that that the people go to my website, gwenmore.house.gov, find out where they can send their kids to eat for the rest of the summer till school starts. We just have to bite off this problem one bite at a time till we reach the goal.
Well, I appreciate you, Congresswoman Gwen Moore. Thank you. We always appreciate when you check in. And thank you for the information. It's always good.
All right.
All
Be
right.
continued.
Yes, ma'am. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. You're listening to Community Voice. We're going to take a quick break. Hopefully, ICE will not come and grab me. Somebody put in the chat, ICE ain't thinking about you. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Right now.
The voice you hear.
Not tooting.
Hey, wait a minute. You brought it up.
Right. Right.
Well, I mean, I just figured since y'all was talking about it, you was talking about that I engage in the conversation.
Your secrets are safe with us right now.
I think so.
Until the next episode.
Right.
This dude, boy, you need to write a book.
No, seriously.
You need to write a book,
I
man.
swear.
You need to share this with the world.
Wow.
No, we were having that conversation, and Ebony Sali,
Yeah.
did I get it correct?
Yep.
Was talking about, because she's married to a Ugandan,
I am.
and she was talking about her experience and his experience with immigration.
Yep.
And this was back in the day.
This was, listen, I was a young, bright whippersnapper in love. And I did. This is before immigration became like a hot button issue.
Well,
before ICE was patrolling our street.
It was always a thing.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
this was been the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Certainly in the 80s, Ronald Reagan
Yep.
was doing, his thing.
Listen, and so I was in love. I'm sure that there are people who find financial gain in the system, much like any other system.
Yeah, because I'll start off. Yeah, man. I was going. At first, I just thought he said he was going to marry a foreigner.
Listen,
but then it gets deeper, right?
Listen. Well, I know that there's always a line for him. There's a hotline. We have a number for right out. He's a hot commodity.
Listen.
He's a hot commodity.
Listen, you ever saw that episode on Martin when Pam had married married a dude?
the dude,
the landlord for the bread.
Listen, let me just say this. You have value right out. You don't have to sell yourself short.
15 grand is 15 grand.
15 grand.
15 grand is 15.
I said,
do I hear 25? Do I hear 25?
Wait a minute. And then he said it was his mama that talked about it. My mama would have been like,
"But you better go get that dust."
And you in relationships where you ain't getting paid? Come on, man.
Yeah,
what
mama
about
told
the
me
love? What about the love?
What about the love?
Love got to do with
What
it.
about the love?
Clark, what about the love?
Hey, man.
Lord, the love.
Listen, my
Hey,
mama
bet you
told
by
me-
golly, Wild turns into I found love on the two-way street. Now, I don't know if it would have been 6 months or a year, but we were over last night. We were talking to my niece and her friend and one of her friends, and we were talking, and we were asking the question. There's a program out there, Married at First Sight.
Yes,
Right.
Lord.
And so,
Lord,
that
Lord.
ridiculousness.
Yeah.
So it was going. So I asked Rhonda, I said, hey, was it love at first sight for you? Oh, boy.
You got it. What you got to do is not ask questions like that. You're going to get an answer. Like if you ask the question, hey, babe, would you do it all over again?
Probably not.
I'm waiting on that one. No, but her response was, it wasn't right away.
See,
So
it
then I said,
never is.
well, wait a minute. I
Okay,
said, so was it
okay.
3 hours?
Oh, Lord. About 24 to 48
24 hours.
Business hours.
I mean, it's because really love is random.
I don't believe in love.
No.
Oh, yeah, I do.
The very first day
I
that
do.
I ever saw Method Man, I knew.
See, but
Yeah.
that wasn't love, though. E.
Oh, yeah, it was.
No,
Yeah,
that
it
was the other L word.
No.
It became the other L word.
No.
It started off.
It started
Y'all
off
got
the
me
other
to
L
getting hot
word.
up in here.
See?
No, I mean,
Sorry.
there have been instances where, and I know we're here to talk about your health.
Love, we talk about this in the morning. Love is healthy.
But no, what I'm saying is that part of it is just our animal nature,
Yes,
right? That
yes,
people that we
yes.
are, and I'm gonna use the term for all you deep religious people who you're sexually attracted to. That's love, right? Falling in love.
Indeed.
It's sexual
You're
attraction.
like, that's what that's
Yeah.
If that's the case,
Yes.
I think I've been in love a whole lot.
Well, there you go.
There you
because
go.
then people get into. Can
I'm in
you
love right now.
You can love.
No, but
I'm in love with my career.
right.
Okay?
But what
Right
happens
now.
is then that, because there are other types of love. It can transition into.
True.
And unfortunately, the way that the animal science works is that a lot of times the people we fall in love with are not the people we can nest with.
There you go.
You know what I mean? Because it's not really based on anything
There you
long
go.
term.
Ah,
It really is something short
There you
term.
go. See,
You know?
this is counseling.
Hear that?
See him reinforcing
Short
what I tell
term.
you every 2 weeks.
yeah.
I tell you.
See, but that's why, man, I be having different ones, man, because it's like short term, man. I fall
Whatever.
in love for like a day.
Hey, because I tell you, long term, and especially when you codify the long term, i.e., you got a contract,
It's legal.
Yeah, it is
Right,
a little bit
right.
more difficult to
True.
extricate yourself from that relationship.
See, man, that's why I keep lawyers, man. I keep lawyers.
Well,
man.
I mean, it gets expensive after a certain
It does.
point.
It does.
That's why they said cheaper than keeper is
That's
in
right.
the document.
and you know what? I used to hear that, and I thought, great little song, had no clue.
Man, please.
I know now.
do the calculation.
I know now.
Do the math.
There's
Do
some
the-
called the math, right? There is, because people say, hey, do you counsel people before they get
Right.
married? I say, yeah, I do, but not the way you think. I mean, there are things out there that can make a healthy relationship,
Mhm, mhm.
but you got to remember, I bring my stuff,
Right.
she brings
Right.
her stuff.
Right.
It's two people there trying to negotiate each other's stuff.
Right.
And so now that's the type of love that you can go beyond that. But it's funny how, and this is again for all you people who may or may not be religious, it's funny how the divide works, because then maybe there's something that will happen in that relationship that will help you realize just how much you care about
You
that
right.
person.
Oh, Keith, you right. Because the damn like,
And then something happened,
they
like
don't-
do get in a
Yeah.
car accident. But I tell my wife though, look,
No, we don't claim that.
no, hold on,
We
wait a
don't
minute.
claim
Well,
that.
it can happen.
We don't claim
I tell
that.
my wife though, if you fall, die.
Damn.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna tell you why. Hold on.
Okay.
I'm gonna tell you why. Because if you in that near vegetated state
Wow.
where you can't do anything,
Wow.
you know what I mean? I mean, it's kind of
Wow.
Dude said just
Wow.
die already.
I would utilize that to, I would like bore him to death. I would find the worst book I could find and just read it very slowly in his vegetative state. And then, right? Come on.
killing me softly with her song.
with her word.
Killing me softly.
It
with
was
her-
the best of times.
It was the worst.
Do you remember when we used to fall in love? Is that Michael Jackson?
No, and I would say that's
I
that
would.
tongue in cheek.
I would.
Obviously, I don't. But I'm just saying that. But then those are decisions. It's
Yeah.
like,
You got to marry somebody that I look at it through the course of life, right? This is going to be the person that when you need adult diapers, right? That's the person that's going to go get them. When you start to lose your parents and the people that mean the most to you,
yeah.
that's the person that's going to be there, right? So although you can love somebody at first sight, that's not the longevity
that
kind
ain't
of love.
substantive.
Right.
It was something that Rhonda said to me. I was still dealing with my back,
Okay. Okay.
and she said, I hate seeing you like this. I hate seeing you in pain.
See?
Now this gets to Job's
That's
wife,
love.
and people really gave Job's wife a hard time. But someone pointed out that she didn't want to see her husband suffering. You know, that impacts us. If you love a person when they're in pain, you're in pain.
Now I have a different philosophy because I like to say, look, God inflicts things when you don't do what you're supposed to do. So if you had to just listen to me and taking the
Boy,
clothes
there
out
they
to
go.
dry when I asked you
There
to,
they
you
go.
wouldn't be feeling so much.
Stop putting that on God.
That's why.
That's why I put that on
You had to
God.
just took the meat out of the freezer when I asked
And you know what God said?
What he
I told you not to marry that dude.
And because you
don't try to put him on
your
me.
side.
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
My grace is sufficient.
Don't you put that evil on me. Because I told you he was crazy. I told you she was nuts.
No.
I loved her. Uh-huh.
That's what gets you.
That's what
boy.
gets you
That's
every
what gets
time.
every
So no, I don't blame God for my decisions. I do not. I was grown enough to make the decisions. I need to be grown enough to accept the consequences of those decisions.
Can I ask a question?
You most certainly can.
Can I ask this question?
You most certainly
Do
can.
you think you should live with somebody for a year or two before you
No.
marry them to see
No.
how they is?
No.
Then
No.
how you gonna know? How you gonna know how they
No.
live?
Okay, but
Wait.
here's my rationale.
No.
Here's my rationale. And I've been married 22 years this September. And I said this. There are some things you put up with when you're contractually bound
Yeah.
that you would
That
not
you wouldn't do.
I wouldn't.
Listen
I
here.
wouldn't do it.
Listen here, man.
You would not. So I will say that sometimes I'm on the wrong side of that. I love my coffee every morning without fail. Gotta have it. I drink it out of a big cup, and it's usually the same cup, right? Wash it at night. I will leave my cup anywhere, right? Sometimes nightstand, sometimes it's where I'm reading my book, right? It floats. Pisses my husband off. Why can't you put it back in the kitchen? Why can't you put it back in the kitchen? That probably would have been one of the things that he would be like, she just leave her coffee cup everywhere. Just leave it.
Is it a grounds for divorce?
I mean, to some, it could be.
And you know what? He's like me in this way. My disability requires order. That is my disability. Everything has a place. If you put it where you're supposed to put it, you can find it when you need it. You know, but it's a sickness with me. I got this thing about I cannot deal with clutter. I cannot deal with clutter. You know, I know. And but no, I think when people do this, isn't it amazing the shifting? I don't hear preachers talking about shacking up like I did back in the day.
That's because in this economy, you got to look. Some people are willing to do some strange.
Yeah, well, I'm just telling you that even in some of the churches that you depend on you going to, ain't no because there's a reality. Like I said this, and again, I'm saying this as Keith Parris. I'm not saying this as a representative of any religion. If you're in your 70s and you talking about getting married,
it's over.
Ooh.
No, you could lose money depending on what your pension is.
True.
I mean, and look, marriage
It's
is
a
about
financial decision.
Right. I mean, so when I think people say, because look, whether you live together or not, the whole thing was a prohibition of people having sex outside of marriage. Well, look,
Tell us
if that's not after lying, if that's not one of the most violated things that's been taught against.
Oh, Lord.
You know, when people that had sex outside of marriage. So if you're trying to stop, and I think that was kind of a simplistic, well, you know, if you're not living together, okay, chances are you having more sex because you're not living together. So, you know, I think it's
holy. See,
not our holy
not
what?
our holiness.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Don't y'all call this show for a woman.
Right. Right. Ebony, always good here. So let's get in for why you're really here.
I mean, you know, I always love a good chit chat, though.
You know, she used to be the voice from the other room. We be talking about something. She'd be in the other room, and you can hear that voice. You can hear. No, y'all not. No, you're not. You can hear the voice. She's the voice from the other room. Outreach, community health.
Yes.
That's Ebony
yes,
Solid.
yes,
Let's
yes.
talk about what's going on Saturday.
Saturday. So you coming, right? You're gonna be there.
I gotta
you
work.
Okay. All right. Who you sending? Nah, right on. You sending right on.
No, and you know what? Let me say this. Ebony be hustling.
Always.
She from one end of that lot to the other.
I am the type of person you never ask someone to do what you are not willing to do for yourself.
I'm with you on that.
So that's how, I mean, phenomenal team though. So Saturday from 11 to 2, we have the 2026 Community Health and Resource Fair at Outreach 220 West Capitol Drive. Listen, it's going to be a time. Speaking of hustling, I'm walking folks through today, our final walkthrough. But I would like to shout out two of our sponsors before we go on. American Cancer Society, just one of those sponsors that realizes that we get sick, right, in our community, especially our community. And then Ascension. So I just want to say kudos to those two for uplifting our work, making sure we're out in the community this Saturday.
Do you all have now? Is Ascension doing any kind of clinics with you all? Or
yeah, so Ascension is probably one of our strongest partners. We have the mobile health unit going to Ebenezer every week, and Calvary. I always want to say Calvary, Missionary Baptist Church.
No, they're not missionary. They're just Baptist.
Just oh Lord, what happened to? We'll
no, they're American Baptist.
we'll talk about that off here. But yeah, just making sure that people don't have excuses to why they can't get quality healthcare.
And I think that it kind of piggybacks on the conversation that Congresswoman Moore was having, where we're looking at all these cuts to programs that deal with people, certainly poor people, and their access to health care. And so as much access as we can give, the healthier our community becomes.
And listen, I will kind of blend the two things that we were just talking about, getting married. Some folks get married for healthcare. Can we just keep it really, really, really real? Like, somebody got some good benefits. You know that make you look a little right, a little hotter. You know what I mean? But
you're so fine with your benefits.
Benefits, girl, and that retirement package. But a lot of folks fall through the cracks. So I'm excited that we get to be there, talking about folks shacking up and having fun before they get married. STIs, come get yourself checked out, right? It's all those
or
little
even
things.
Pregnancies.
Listen, all of it.
Because that whole prenatal care becomes real important. And, you know, I mean, we can talk about marriage, but I think one of the issues, I know we do work around infant mortality and the work that we do around fatherhood development. And one of the more fascinating stats was that many people who are not married, the fathers are there 18 months postpartum. But at the same time, let's talk about the women who deal with those issues around, you know, postpartum rejection, postpartum depression.
It's such a huge life change that although, you know, women are smart, brilliant, resilient, we hear about it, but until you staring at that baby like, they really let me walk out of the hospital with no instructions, and I'm responsible for a life like that. That's a moment.
You know, and it's funny because we have to get a license to buy a dog.
Talk about it.
But we don't license people when it comes to whether or not. And again, it kind of started off our whole conversation about how our animal nature works. And so me being sexually attracted to someone, we can procreate. And it does what look, when the creator put it in place, it was like, there's the drive. This is how you procreate. And, but then that's not the same as nesting. Correct. You know, when you have to get there and figure out how you're going to raise that child together, all the pressures that you had. We had 2 doctors on from Ascension yesterday, and they were talking about all these stressors and trauma and how it impacts our mental health. And, you know, it's more than just having a baby.
That's the easy part. That's the easy. I mean, to be fair, that's the easy part. It's the
raising them. And look, I don't know if there is such a thing of ideal parents, because I think each kid brings their own thing with them. And parents have to figure out, how do I pivot to Ebony is this way, but Keith is this way. Right. You know, and then I think, you know, being the oldest.
And I'm the only.
But a lot of mistakes are made on me. And then the 2 that come after me, they kind of benefit from my mom learning. And when I say mistakes that are made, look, it is not.
There are no perfect parents.
Right. You know, because they asked yesterday, well, no, I did not have a overly traumatic childhood. My childhood, I had a lot of fun in my childhood, but that didn't mean that there weren't things that's happening. A single mom struggling, trying to figure out how to feed 3 kids, right? With or without the help of the person who helped created those 3 kids. You know, so it could be, I'm not going to say it was trauma free.
We all, and you bring up a good point, because I share this with my daughter. We all share a different trauma with our kids, and we're all trying to assuage what we went through, right? Like, I felt I had to grow up because I was the only, had to be perfect, couldn't, because whatever I did wrong, you got bad parents, right? If you act up in school, that's a direct reflection of your parents. So you got to be on point. I was a little more lenient with my kid, right? And that affected her in different ways.
Well, you met Kennedy. I got a picture of you and Kennedy, right? Kennedy's an only child, and I worry sometimes about the whole social piece of it, you know, like, because she's just used to talking to adults. Her affirmation comes from adults. You may or may not get affirmation for another 7-year-old, right? They dealing with their thing. No, when Angela Harris was on talking about how kids go to school and they might not have the best clothes or they
Right,
smell a certain
right,
way. The other
right.
kids,
Right.
they're
We'll
not
let you
going there.
know.
Right. They're not talking about the 400 years of institutional racism
Right,
and systemically
right.
why you might be in the situation you're in. All we
Right.
know is you smell like
Right.
pee. And we're going
Right.
to let you know you
Right.
smell like pee, right?
Right.
So that was
right.
always,
Yeah,
that's my
yeah.
concern in terms of that. But yeah, I think everybody, whether you're only child,
Yeah.
you can come
Yeah.
from a gaggle of kids.
Gaggle. Y'all is a
Why you
gaggle.
point to me when you said a gaggle?
Gaggler right now.
It was a whole heap of us though.
You tell
You
them,
got enough for a professional team.
Yeah.
tell them about that station wagon.
Oh man, listen, it was like clowns getting up out of that joint. It just didn't stop.
The clown car like, any more ride outs? Here come another ride out.
We pulled up at the church. It was 10 minutes unloading.
My mom sent me to Tennessee when I was 2.
Okay.
Because she had my brother, and so she sent me down to be with an aunt. So from 2 until 5, I was
Okay.
basically an only child.
Okay.
And so I had cousins who lived across the road from us, directly across the road. So I would go over there because the kids were over there.
Mhm.
And it was like 11, 12 of them.
Can't even imagine.
Man, right.
Can't even imagine.
But you know, it was really funny, and I hate to bring this up, and I think about it years later. It'd be so weird because, my cousins were, like Right House complexion, and then it'd be me. And people trying to figure out
How you get?
how you get here. But no, I think that all of that, and I think it's great that when you all do the out, and you all started out outreach, right?
Yeah.
Outreach for the
Yeah.
homeless.
Yeah.
But that whole outreach where we sometimes have to meet people where we are. We've been talking about democratic socialism.
Oh Lord. Okay.
No, but let me give you an example
Okay.
of democratic socialism here
Okay.
relating to our conversation.
Okay.
In Milwaukee,
Mhm.
if up until you were 5 years old, a nurse would come out to check on you,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
They would come
Okay.
to check on you. That was socialism, to make sure that if there were any kind of health issues with kids,
Right.
they're identified and
Right.
you have, and these are nurses.
Right.
Because I can remember when they came out for my sister.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a struggle though, because the things that work, we fight so hard against.
well, we don't want to pay for it.
But a healthy and well workforce serves everyone well.
Well, that's why
Is
we have
it-
health insurance. Your
Right.
employer offered it. If you're healthy, you can come to work. No, really. I mean, it was practical. And people laugh about it, but it's true. I mean, if I can provide you with health care, you're a healthier employee.
Correct.
Means chances are
Correct.
you're going to be more productive.
But don't we believe as a collective society that if we're all healthy, like if you could use your sick days for well days, I'm not a person that gets sick for a long time.
Mhm.
I love to just be able to be like, it's 70 degrees outside. I'm feeling good. I just don't want to go to work because
the
I'm well
old
today.
mental health
Yeah,
day.
because I'm well today. I
You know what?
feel
Let me
good
tell you the
today.
problem with mental health
Okay,
days.
please do, please
I
do.
took too many mental health days,
Okay.
and then I got sick.
Okay.
Now I
You
got
take your echinacea.
And so when I
ginseng.
had just enough sick time to cover my illness. And you know what happened after that? When I retired from the county, I had 900 hours of sick
Have
time.
mercy.
DJ's mom had so much sick time. Yeah, I mean, it got to the point because then as you get older,
Right.
and that's the whole thing about healthcare and young people feel like, one, they're invincible. They're not dealing with a lot of issues.
So that back goes out the
till the
first
back
time.
goes out.
the
So-
first time.
So can't you use is it called FMA, FMLA, FM?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you still have to have the time
Yeah.
to get paid. All the FNLA says is that they can't terminate you.
Right.
You don't have the time. You're just doing it
Accrue.
without pay.
Yeah.
Doing it without pay.
Yeah, if you don't have the time. And that's why, and a lot of people go to PTO now, so that can be used for anything, right?
I feel like we got to start over. It's a beautiful time. The world is crumbling.
Yeah.
Let's just start over.
No.
Let's do something different. Let's just try something different.
Well, let me tell you why that's so difficult. It was something, and I didn't really get a chance when Congresswoman Moore. There is something, if you study political science, something called status quo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most of us want the status quo. That means it doesn't change. We'll nibble around the edges. We will, if there's something dramatic going on like the Great Depression, there's something we're going to go. But I'm telling you, most people vote for the status quo.
What about now, though? Like, what about the actual time that we are in right now?
The times that we're in right now means that we want to change a little bit of the status quo, but not a radical change. Like the rise of democratic socialism is a response to inequities economically people were experiencing in society.
Yeah.
And so that's when you see a rise of that movement, right?
We'll have to call it something different, but the principle stays.
The principles, and if you ask most people, like I have people coming in and they're railing against socialism. I said, so what do you think of social security?
Right.
You know, which
Right.
was, and look, when
Right.
and if you understand the history, what led up to social security, those things didn't exist before 1935.
Listen.
The Communist Party is making inroads in America because of income inequality that was really exacerbated because of the Depression. So
Don't get me started.
FDR made a decision
Yeah.
that here's what we need to do. Once again, like when I was talking to Congresswoman Moore about doing COVID and all that stimulus money, you can't show me one Republican red state that sent back money that didn't take advantage of that money. You can't show me one corporation that didn't take advantage of.
True.
That's socialism.
True.
Okay, which is if people study economics,
but
it's
we don't call those things out when they occur, so people don't make the connection. Something as simple as communism is the word. Everybody against communism. China is a communist country, right?
but they pivoted.
Okay, just go with me on this.
Mhm.
When you look at our home mortgages, debt securities, all of that, most of that is invested by the Chinese, right?
Mhm.
So something about their system works because in essence, they own us because we put so much value in our housing market. It funds everything else, right? It's the biggest asset we have in the country. So we don't want to have that conversation because that's a more difficult conversation.
Well, no, I think what you're pointing out is how we're globally tied economically.
So we're not so upset with communism that we're willing to rebuild our housing market in the way we structure our debts in this country. We're not that mad. We're just big mad on TV, but not really
if
mad.
you look at it, if we could pull it up, what is the percentage of our economy that's based on housing? Probably a pretty significant part of our, and here's the other thing, healthcare.
All of it.
But healthcare becomes significant because healthcare has become so monetized that now, and see what China did was China said, okay, the government will take care of you,
right?
But then you're going to produce. Okay, so they made the adjustment.
Right.
And I think we kind of still have this Cold War sense of communism. So we get back, we'll talk about
it's
that.
all connected. It's all connected.
You're listening to Community Voice. We're joined in studio by Miss Ebony Saleh, Community Outreach Health Centers, and we'll be right back.
Your host, Keith Parris.
Welcome back to Community Voice. We're joined in studio by Miss Ebony Saleh. She's here to talk about a very important resource fair that's happening Saturday. And so when we get back from the break, she'll go into more information. You're listening to Community Voice. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Community Voice.
Covering all the things.
We covered everything. Well, you know what? My program is about everything and nothing.
You ain't lying.
Well, I mean,
It
community
is.
heartbeat is much of the same.
The piggyback, huh? All this piggyback.
Just
Throw
what
some
every-
health in there. We
Just when everybody thought we get ready to get deep, somebody will come up and say something. Okay, here we go. This is in the chat. Good health care, better to have it and not to need it than to
True.
need it and not have it.
True.
And I agree with that. And you know, you don't, again, when you're younger, you know, you it's like your car. You don't have to do a whole lot of maintenance when it's
Living
young.
wild and free.
Yeah, but we got a
Wild
car
and
that's
free.
13 years old. And we really gotta, and we don't have to do a lot of care because we took care of it from the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know if that is a metaphor for life, but I think important of understanding your health. You know, we ignore a lot. We learn how to live with our symptoms, you know, but and then, you know, there's a difference between how men view healthcare, how women view healthcare. you know, and women probably only because of pregnancy, right? That they're more likely.
We are
to
more
be,
than just our birth giving years.
Oh.
Just saying, starting to protest in here. No, but it's that, but I think there was a shift maybe early 90s, mid 90s that women started taking care of themselves, not just from a childbirth or just to look good, but like to actually be good.
I got yelled at last night. I was pointing out that Karen Clark-Shear must be using Ozempic because she's lost so much weight.
Man.
And my wife was like, why are you criticizing her? I said, I'm not criticizing her.
How Dorinda looking? Okay.
Dorinda still look
okay.
Dorinda.
Okay.
She still look Dorinda. Twinkie still look, and
Twinkie
Twinkie
like
has some,
Twinkie.
and
But
has some help.
Karen has always kind of.
She almost died
Yeah.
from
Yeah,
having
yeah.
a surgery.
Yep.
No. She almost died from surgery. I don't know if she did gastric bypass.
So which one was that almost drove off the cliff? Was that Dorinda?
It could have been.
Oh my God.
But what I'm saying is, and Oprah said this, who's also using Ozempic. I said, you know, vanity drives a lot of it,
Oh my God.
but it should be your health. So you know what? You might not lose that last 5 pounds, but you could probably be in the best shape of your life.
Well, here's the thing, and I hope I don't get blowback from this. We are always searching for the quick fix. It was the fin, it was the
Slim
Excedrin. For it was like the pre-workout was big and none of that is good for your
Oh,
heart.
and before we had HIV, it was AIDS.
You see,
Remember that? No, not the disease. There was a product out there called AIDS. It was a weight reduction product.
So you give yourself
No. I remember it. Yeah.
Wow.
And I think vanity, it gets us up in the morning. But I'm thinking if we can be in the best health, the best shape we can be in at that point in our life.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, and then the other thing is how we look does impact how we think.
Oh my God. And it affects, let's be real. It affects how people treat you.
Yeah.
So the days where I roll out of the house, no lipstick on, just looking right. Baseball cap, you could see one little Michael Jackson curl. People treat me differently than when I come out with a little bit of lipstick.
Oh yeah, because when I'm in incognito,
listen, I get treated the same.
You know,
people
treat you differently.
Because Pretty Ricky, what they call you.
I try to tell them that that's who I am.
Pretty Ricky.
But don't be cute and also have heart disease. That would be my message. Don't not sweat your hair out, but then you have diabetes like that.
And that's the downside of vanity.
Yeah.
Vanity, let's talk about a health issue that this time of year we're dealing with, the number of Black youth who drown.
That part.
And part of that is their moms and dads, because they got their hair did, don't want them to get in the pool.
I was listen.
Yeah, but the same kids then want to get in the water and can't swim.
Right.
And look, can I give y'all some history on Black folks in swimming?
Please do. Please.
Do you know that during enslavement, it was illegal to teach a slave to swim?
Of course.
I'll say it again.
Yeah.
That's the legacy. It was illegal to teach a slave to swim.
And why was that? Because
Escape.
Yeah.
So I mean, sometimes your vanity can get you and got me into a whole lot. I was looking at when I was young, had my bush. You couldn't get me to put a hat on.
Right.
And all of this is ice. Oh, no, I didn't do the pick in it. You know why? Because I had a teacher, Larry Gross, he's gone home to glory. And dude came in with a pick in his hair and he said, take the pick out. And then he used the N word and said, you ain't from Africa.
My pick in the front. I used
But
to wear mine in the front.
That's a whole different, because I will tell you this. I feel there are so many things that are historic to our very nature, our very soul.
Yeah.
Like the chains, the jewelry. That's just where we from. That's just we have always had minerals. We've always had like the jewelry.
But how much of it is also though us compensating, fake it till you make it, compensating for senses of inadequacy or inferiority. And so if we look a certain way, but healing is internal.
It is.
I mean, you that's why when you have a wound, they're giving you an antibiotic. They're not trying to deal with the scab, they're dealing with the
It's so
infection,
multi-layered.
yeah, that's in your womb.
So could it be?
Wound.
It's
So could it be that, like you just said
Yeah.
with the jewelry
Yeah.
and things like
Yeah.
that? Could it be that we saw somebody else doing it and it intrigued us to the point that we wanted to be like them?
Look at where the minerals come from.
Yeah.
So whenever, and I love those kinds of conversations because people, why they got to do the most? Why they got to do even to bring the swimming back full circle? We said, okay, let's put braids in, and now we'll work out, and now we'll swim, and now we'll do all that. Now, if somebody sees a black girl with some braids, where were you? How long did it take to get that? Let me touch it. Let me.
But and this is just a societal observation, and I'm going to look at this as descendants of enslaved Africans. I look at folks now; they're so made up.
Oh.
You gonna get it?
I don't know. The hair is a lot of it is not self-grown. It's
Sure,
it's,
a weave, yeah.
yeah. I
can be
mean,
real.
and I wonder how much of that is we're reverting back, because in the late '60s when Black and Proud we went natural. How much of that is reverting back to European standards of beauty?
Ooh. Okay, I'm gonna give you a different point of view.
Okay.
So, because I love my weave, I held on very tight to it for many years. If you're going to be a woman, Black professional, and you're going to be moving from here into there, I will wake up at 5 o'clock. First event is at 8. Then next event is at 11. Turn around and go chaperone a field trip. Then I got a dinner event. And you have to look right for each of those. So sometimes my curls fall, right? I'm not in the bathroom recurling my hair. The weave just works. So it had nothing to do with me trying to be somebody or right.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but even
it was convenient.
Would that influence what the weave looked like?
Well, for me, I loved my curl. And so here's the thing for me. At growing up as a kid, my hair has always been curly. I lived for a relaxer. Oh my God, Mom, let me relax my hair. I wanted to be straight. I wanted to be.
You had that fine hair.
Now that's the thing, right? But as a kid, I'm like trying to get this
of the perm.
No, this is how my hair has always been.
Okay.
Mike, that's why I say the Michael Jackson curl was real.
Okay.
But this was in the age where girls had the short wrap and the short bob, and it was super straight.
Yeah.
And I would press my get it straight, and it would curl right back up.
Well, let me say what my and I'm only doing this description. My fair-skinned mother who did hair. My fair-skinned mother who did hair always said that there's no such thing as bad hair when it comes to Black people.
At all.
She adamant about that. She said we got heat and grease.
Listen.
But her point was that when we looked at, we want like really long straight hair. Now there's parts of Africa where that happens. If you're in Eastern Africa, that happens. But because of where we were for thousands of years and what it did in terms of our evolving and adapting to environment, but I think it is how we think about ourselves and then what becomes a standard of beauty. And look, I tell people I am trying to unlearn so much white supremacy. I mean, it is so inculcated in us.
You gonna talk about going left. I'm gonna give you this stat,
Okay.
and I hope my parents are listening when I share this. We talk about standards of beauty. When you find the data and the stats for most adult websites, Black women are at the top. So whether it's shared in public or not, Black women are the standard of beauty around the world. But I said it very professionally.
No, Sally Hemings. Sally Hemings. Like everybody.
Exactly.
Somebody was talking about some. They said, yeah. Well, Thomas Jefferson had a Black girlfriend.
You see?
Yeah, but I'm not so much the people that look at us. I'm talking about how we look at us. Because trust me, that there's a lot of brothers out there, and I know I get some blowback, who their standard of beauty is,
it's a slippery slope. Bless you. It's a slippery slope.
All
I
right.
mean, what you find attractive is a part of your environment, is a part of how you're raised. It's all connected.
All right. So again, tell us about the outreach community health centers.
Join us this Saturday, 11 to 2. come and just say hey. Meet the NOV will be broadcasting. We'll be chatting on the air. Come say hey to me. Take a selfie or two. But it's for the community. So food, fun, family.
You gonna say hey to her? Make sure you have on your running shoes.
Hey,
because she's moving.
I am always.
And we get a chance to meet the CEO.
Yeah. Well, no, she'll be out this particular time,
man.
but you will get to meet the team. And it'll be a good day. The weather is supposed to be perfect. Amen. Because the last few years it's been hot.
It was hot. Last year was
yes.
hot.
And then the floods after that. So it was not a good time. So this will be a good time. Come out.
You guys get damage from the flood?
We did not. We lost power for a few days.
Yeah, because you were high ground.
Yep.
You know, it was crazy. The August 8th flood was my class reunion. And we were at Hubbard Park, and, you know, they have that lodge, which is elevated.
Right.
So I had no clue what was going on.
Yeah,
and I had people, because a lot of my classmates North Shore.
Yep.
And it was just talking about the water.
The water, the power.
Again, food.
Come on out. It's going to be a time.
It'd be a great time.
Yeah. Free produce, free lunch. Yeah. All that good stuff.
Let me thank Clark Kent. Let me thank Apostle.
Conspiracy with a Z.
Gigolos need love too. Let me thank Congresswoman Gwen Moore, and of course Miss Ebony Saleh of Community Outreach. Again, hope to see everybody on Saturday. I will be there Saturday.
Okay.
You know, so get a chance to say, hey y'all, the good Lord willing. Tomorrow's gonna be a long day. I'm covering for Michelle tomorrow morning. So
maybe you should bring some sliders tomorrow, since we're gonna be here all day.
Oh, you gonna put me to work. All right. we just sit up here and talk about enslavement. And here you come.
Enslaving them.
And you can put Silas back to work. You know, it was Thomas Jefferson's enslaved African who brought macaroni and cheese to America.
Amen. It was macaroni.
It was one of the best decisions he could have
ever made, man.
I love a good food document.
Hey, y'all, the good Lord willing, Creek don't rise. In spite of slavery.
Right.
Hey, y'all, the Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. I hope to talk to everybody tomorrow. And as always, go for this place of peace.